I don't know how many times since probably February through now that I've said this team could be a college football playoff contender. And it's time to kind of figure out who will be the 12 teams making up the college football playoff in 2024 and into 2025. And I didn't take this lightly. I've mentioned several times, and we've had entire shows dedicated to who is going to represent the group of five, who's maybe a dark horse college football playoff contender. And there should be a dark horse college football playoff contender on your bracket, however you decide to fill it out. And I think, one, it's important to note that when you look through the college football playoff, I've seen this several times where somebody will say, hey, here's who I think is going to make the college football playoff, release their bracket on social media. And somebody will say, how in the hell is Kansas State the number 3 seed? You think they're going to go 13-0? No, I don't. I don't think Utah is going to go undefeated. I don't think insert any ACC team here. But when seeds number 1 through 4 are reserved for conference champions, it doesn't matter if 12-0 Georgia plays 12-0 whoever that's not on their schedule in the SEC championship game. Only one of those teams. It could be 1 versus 2 going into the SEC title game, or 1 versus 2 in the Big Ten championship game. Only one of them is getting a bye. If the consensus is that head and shoulders above everybody else, that Ohio State and Oregon are the 2 best teams in America, guess what? Only one of them gets a bye. So you have to keep that in mind when looking at the college football playoff and looking at the brackets. So without further ado, I know you have been on pins and needles waiting to hear what my college football playoff bracket looks like. And it looks like this. I have not gone out on a limb in a whole lot of places. I think Georgia is the number 1 team in America. I think Georgia maybe loses a game. And if they do lose a game, they will be viewed as that's a throwaway game. Everybody loses one. So I don't think it's all that big of a deal. I don't know how many undefeated teams there are. I would pick right now, and this is mid-August, to tell you that Georgia and Ohio State enter the college football playoff both at 13-0. That's what my gut tells me right now. So I have Georgia at number 1 and Ohio State at number 2. And for my 2 other conference champions, I don't know that Oklahoma State is going to win the Big 12 conference regular season title outright. But I feel like when push comes to shove, they'll be good enough in the Big 12 championship game to win and get one of the 4 byes. And then finally, I have North Carolina State in a somewhat similar situation where I think NC State, I think Grayson McCall is a gamer and can play. And I don't know that he's gotten his due because he's played at Coastal Carolina. If he had played the majority of his college career at North Carolina State, 1, he probably wouldn't have played as much as he did at Coastal Carolina. But then 2, I think he would be viewed as somewhat of a household name of like, hey, this guy's fun to watch. And so I'm putting a lot of faith and stock in NC State to be good and great when it matters most. And we'll chat more about that coming up. So 1 through 4, Georgia, Ohio State, Oklahoma State, NC State. Now, I only have 1 Big 12 school on the list because I think they have so much parity between each other that I think Kansas can beat anybody in the conference. I think Kansas State can probably beat anybody in a conference. I think Oklahoma State can beat anybody in a conference. I don't know that Arizona is on that same level, but I think Utah can be beaten. I don't know that Utah is going to get the benefit of the doubt if they're 10-2 or 9-3. So somebody's going to get a conference championship bid. I would pick Oklahoma State to beat Utah in the Big 12 championship right now. People are high on Kansas State. I get it. Avery Johnson is a really interesting talent to look at. I just don't know that I would trust him enough to, or maybe not even him, trust the playmakers around him to be great for 13 consecutive weeks. So I have Oklahoma State as the lone Big 12 representative in the college football playoff. At number 5, I have Texas. I think Texas probably loses to Georgia in the SEC championship game. Now, there have been already some injuries that make you look at Texas differently and go, oh man, in the preseason, you have had some tough injuries. But I'm high on Texas. I believe in Quinn Ewers, and if Quinn Ewers somehow goes down, I believe in Steve Sarkisian to get Arch Manning ready and prepared and good to go whenever that happens. Should that happen, I guess I should say. I believe in Steve Sarkisian. I believe in Texas. And I'll believe in them until they tell me and prove to me that I shouldn't have believed in them. I have Texas playing Liberty in the 5-12 game. I don't know that Liberty is the best group of 5 representative, but I've contended for a while that their schedule is so not good that they will have the best group of 5 record. And I'm not certain, unless the American Conference champion or Boise State only has 1 loss, I don't know that there's an argument to be made that Liberty doesn't get the group of 5 spot. So Texas and Liberty. Winner moves on to play North Carolina State. That's my 5-12. In the 6-11, I have Oregon at number 6. I am not as high on Oregon as some, but I do think that there is going to be a somewhat concerted effort to try to avoid first-round conference rematches or first-round conference games. So, for instance, if in this scenario where you have Oregon at 6, Oregon doesn't play Penn State, I think that the College Football Playoff Committee will try to avoid an all Big Ten matchup in the first round or an all SEC matchup in the first round. They don't want to, because they don't want to hear from the commissioners of those conferences saying hey, you are inherently making sure that we don't get a team to the second round or to the semifinals. You are making certain that this is going to happen, that you're limiting our chances to advance by putting 2 schools from one conference together. For instance, I live in Ohio. In the Ohio high school football playoffs for a while, it didn't matter where it got to the state semifinals in football, and it would just magically appear that any place, any time that there was an opportunity for there to be 2 private schools in the state semifinals and 2 public schools in the state semifinals, the private schools had to play each other because they didn't want there to be 2 private schools playing for the state championship. So you'd knock one of them out in the state semifinal. I think that's what's going to happen, or it's the opposite that's going to happen in the college football playoff. They're not going to put an Alabama versus Texas game in the first round. They're not going to put a Penn State versus Oregon, in my opinion, in the first round. So I have Oregon at number 6, and I think they get moved up basically to avoid another all conference. And I think they tried to limit also with that is you avoid the first round conference games and then also avoid a potential rematch in the second round. So I have Oregon at 6 and Miami at 11. I am putting faith in Cam Ward, just like I did with Grayson McCall in North Carolina State, that Cam Ward is going to be a dynamic player for Miami. So I'm putting faith in him that he is going to be the missing link, the missing key, the whatever word you want to use. And that Miami's schedule is so not good that essentially all they have to do is not lose to both Florida, or I guess not lose to Florida, not lose to both Florida and Florida State. That's all they've got to do. If Miami can go 10-2, Miami can go 11-1, and lose in the ACC championship game, which is what I have predicted here, is that North Carolina State will beat Miami in the ACC championship game. I think they're in. And again, I have said all offseason, I don't know that Miami is as good as people believe that they are, or that their schedule is worse than you didn't realize it was. But they sneak in. They lose to North Carolina State. I think they probably go into the ACC championship game ranked somewhere in the 6 through 8 range, lose to North Carolina State. And that's the discussion on that Sunday is it, I'm not as high on LSU, for instance. I think Ole Miss is destined to take a step backwards in 2024. But I think the argument is going to be, is it Miami? Is it who at 11? And I'll give the nod to the Canes. So Oregon plays Miami in a 6-11 game. Winner moves on to play Oklahoma State in my projected bracket. I think Alabama is still a college football playoff team. Despite the idea that they are not recruiting at the level they were at Nick Saban, despite Kalen DeBoer being a first-year head coach and being the guy that replaces the guy, I think Alabama still gets it done in 2024, and I'll have them playing Penn State, the number 10 seed. I think Penn State sits at home on conference championship weekend. So they don't do anything to help themselves, but they don't do anything to hurt themselves either. If Penn State does not make the college football playoff, I think there are legitimate questions in Happy Valley about the future of James Franklin. They either got to make it this year or they got to make it next year, because there really aren't going to be a whole lot of excuses for why you didn't make the college football playoff. In a 4-team, your fan base can understand that you're probably not going to beat both Ohio State and Michigan every single year, or even most years. Your fan base is understanding that, like, hey, probably not going to beat those two schools every year. Now, in a divisionless Big Ten, and with an expansion to 12, Penn State has no reason. There are no excuses for why this didn't work out for you. You got to get it done. And I'll predict, I don't feel great about it, but I'll put some faith into James Franklin, to Drew Aller, Julian Fleming, and say Penn State makes college football playoff at number 10. And finally, the winner of that game plays Ohio State. And then in the 8-9 matchup, I'll put Notre Dame and Missouri. I think Missouri is in that same category as Miami. That I don't know that they are the 9th best team in America. But I also don't think that there are many teams on their schedule that are going to beat them. They have to beat one of Alabama and Oklahoma. Texas A&M, I guess. So if you go 2-1 against A&M, Alabama, Oklahoma, and I think Oklahoma might just be slightly overrated, Mizzou's probably in the college football playoff. I saw somebody, it was Matt Jones from Kentucky Sports Radio, try to make the argument that Kentucky can go 9-3 and make the college football playoff in 2024. I don't think that's the case. That basically they're saying, hey, we're going to beat Southern Miss, South Carolina, Ohio, Vandy, and Murray State. Beaten Louisville 5 times in a row. Beaten Florida 4 times in a row. You need to beat one of Ole Miss on the road, Tennessee on the road, Texas on the road, and you lose to Georgia. Basically, if we lose to Georgia and Texas, we have to beat either Ole Miss or Tennessee, and we're in the college football playoff. I don't think that highly of Kentucky. I don't think it's that likely. But I think Missouri, absolutely unequivocally, can go 2-1 against Texas A&M, Alabama, and Oklahoma. So give me the Tigers in the college football playoff, and they'll play Notre Dame, who similarly I think Riley Leonard is going to do good things for Notre Dame. They beat Texas A&M to start the season. It's kind of a long stretch before they're really tested again to essentially Florida State in November at home. I think Notre Dame probably finishes 11-1. But the highest they can be is number 5. I think Texas probably is viewed as a better team at 10-2 or 11-1 or 11-2 if they lose the SEC championship game, which I would have them here in this scenario. I don't think Notre Dame is going to leapfrog teams that lost their conference championship games and went into and basically like the College Football Playoff Committee has kind of pretended as if like the championship weekend can only help you, right? Like you're going to drop somebody who lost just because like you're not probably going to be viewed as the second best team in America the day after a loss. But they're not going to drop if Texas is ranked number 2 going into the SEC championship game or Texas is ranked 3rd. They're not going to drop them from 3 to 9. Not going to drop them from 3 to 8. Because essentially that's punishing them for playing an extra game, for being successful throughout the season. Where Notre Dame is going to be punished because they didn't have that conference championship game. They didn't have that 13th data point. So Notre Dame, Missouri, 8-9. Winner plays Georgia. I'm not going to tell you how I think all of this plays out today. We've talked about this for long enough. And it gives me something to talk about on Thursday to tell you, hey, who's my national championship prediction? Who I think is going to win the Heisman Trophy? All of those things. But these are the 12 right here. Number 1, Georgia. Number 2, Ohio State. Number 3, Oklahoma State. Number 4, NC State. Number 5, Texas. Number 6, Oregon. Number 7, Alabama. Number 8, Notre Dame. Number 9, Missouri. Number 10, Penn State. Number 11, Miami. Number 12, Liberty. That is my college football playoff predictions for 2024. On Thursday, I'll tell you who I think wins the national championship and who wins the Heisman Trophy, because we are on the cusp of the 2024 college football season kicking off, and I can't wait. I know you can't either. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of my college football playoff predictions. Love to have that conversation with you. Am I way off base? I'm certain I've got teams on here that you would not have on your list, and I'm certain I've got teams that aren't on my top 12 that you would have. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below, and I look forward to reading them. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.